Good evening, you're watching News Always On. I'm Kessyl. A Chinese government spokesman has said Beijing will not bow in the face of threats and blackmail on the eve of US tariff hikes and will defend its interests. The Trump administration is poised to raise tariffs on $34 billion of Chinese imports on Friday in a dispute over technology policy. China has threatened to retaliate. China's Commerce Ministry spokesman Gao Feng said that by starting the trade war, the US was, quote, opening fire at the whole world. He said China was not willing to fight a trade war, but will be forced to take countermeasures should the US roll out the tariffs. Gao also said that China would call on all countries to take common actions to fight against the trade bullying of the US. When asked about the impact on US investment in China, Gao said the government would protect the legal rights and interests of all foreign enterprises in China and would offer help to those impacted, but he did not elaborate on how are they going to do that. Gao said, quote, "This kind of trade bullying by raising up the big stick of tariffs to blackmail others around the world is against the trend of the times. China will not bow in face of threats, nor will it waver in its determination of safeguarding globalization and multilateral trade system. China will work with other countries to fight against the perversion of backward and outdated protectionism and unilateralism, at the same time maintaining a stable and foreseeable global trade circumstance. China will never fire the first shot. What the US is doing is a comprehensive setback. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little. We believe the people all over the world understand and support our position. We call on all countries to take common actions to firmly oppose trade protectionism and unilateralism, so as to defend the common interests of the people of the world." The impending onset of higher US tariffs on Chinese imports has raised concerns among economists over its potential impact on Chinese firms and the economy. A LandAct, a Beijing-based analyst who tracks Chinese policies, said some export-dependent cities may be hit the hardest, but the authorities are drawing up measures to prevent a full-blown crisis. Let us hear what he has to say. Let's try again and look at the video. A decline in the stock market and expressions of concern among academics point to an underlying anxiety over the trade friction that contradicts Beijing's confident posture. Yu Zhi, a professor at Shanghai University of Finance and Economics, said Beijing may have miscalculated the pain the tariffs could inflict on the country's exporters' already razor-thin margins. Yu said the impact of the first stage of tariffs that target mostly Chinese technology exports could be manageable. But if Trump imposes the full scope of tariffs he has threatened to use, it would decimate the profits of the bulk of Chinese exporters and lead to sell-offs in stock markets. He said, "American companies have stronger anti-pressure abilities than Chinese companies. The reliability of China upon the US markets is higher than the US on the Chinese market, and the US can impose tariffs on more Chinese products than China can do on the US products. Therefore, if the trade war really starts and is broadened, China will not have enough capacity to resist the pressure. It will bring large impact on the confidence of Chinese and overseas investors. They will then sell off shares of Chinese companies and Chinese bonds, and they will sell off renminbi. This will bring huge pressure on the stock market, the bond market, and the currency market." Moving on to our third story for today. Activists in two separate protests against the Trump administration's immigration policies were arrested at the Statue of Liberty on July 4th. One group was unfurling a banner calling for abolition of the US immigration and customs enforcement, while another woman climbed the statue's base to protest immigrant family separations. Here we can see the video showing the woman identified as Therese Okamo, walking, sitting and lying down on different parts of the statue's base near the foot and ropes. About 4,500 tourists were evacuated from the island. NYPD detective Brian Glacken told reporters that the woman told them she was protesting the situation of the children in Texas. The New York Daily News reported that she herself is an immigrant, having been born and educated in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. She now lives in Staten Island and has lived in New York for at least 10 years.
We received a call for a person climbing up on the Statue of Liberty. I'd say it was around 3:15. We wound up having to respond onto a harbor launch to get over there, so it was limited the equipment that we could bring. Once we got there, State Park Police brought us up to the location at the base where she was, and that's when we started to engage in conversation with her. Not really. She just kind of mentioned, she just mentioned the kids in Texas. I guess, the whole debate that's going on right now about that. If she'd really elaborate, too much into it. At first, she wasn't friendly with us, but we took our time to basically get a dialogue with her and get a rapport with her so she would trust us. So that took a while. I mean, everybody here was involved. I mean, it was a really technical rescue just because of the slopes up there. I mean, it wasn't a flat surface. There was nothing for Chris and I to grab onto, so that high point and trusting in the equipment that we have and trusting in the guys behind me that did this is really what made it work.
Yeah, so just say your names on
Detective Brian Glacken.
Fill it up.
Despite no signs of North Korea abandoning its nuclear weapons anytime soon, South Korea is literally bouncing ahead this week with peace efforts with its rival. 2 days of friendly basketball games winding up in Pyongyang were the latest goodwill gestures between the Koreas in recent months. The women's and men's matches came just ahead of the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's arrival in North Korea on Friday for 2 days of talks over the future of the North's nuclear program. A capacity of crowd of 12,000 applauded as the teams, dressed in white jerseys that read peace and green jerseys that read prosperity, marched onto the court holding hands. Players from the North and South were mixed into teams for Wednesday's games. It remains to be seen how much further the rival Koreas can push their conciliatory steps. The fate of these efforts is ultimately tied to progress in nuclear negotiations between Washington and Pyongyang. If the nuclear talks bog down, it could mean curtains for inter-Korean detain. Looks like that's all the time we have for today. For more on this and for News Always On, I'm Kessyl. I will see you tomorrow.
They are worried about certain local economies too dependent on their export. The answer that they have drawn up is twofold. One is to expand domestic consumption. Of course, also find ways around the US. Maybe they can diversify and help diversifying these local economies. And the other one is providing liquidity to do big structural changes in the economy. And we're not seeing they agree on the rules. If gets included and we see a lot of tit for tat, the Chinese have concluded that it might drop global trade with 70%. And that will affect not only their economy, but it will also affect their national security. Because China needs energy, they need food, and they're doing domestic reforms now to become more dependent on the global markets. That's why you will see a much more active Chinese foreign policy and backing of a multilateral system. It might not be the same as what we see today.